All right, YouTube. There is now reporting from the West Bank in Palestine that the third Intifada has begun. 50,000 people, up from a few hours ago. It seemed like about 10,000 people reported were protesting the Israeli occupation of Gaza. We've seen protests all over the world as well. There have been protests and riots in Turkey, the United States, even in Israel itself, among Jewish individuals who don't support the occupation of Gaza. But now the Palestinians have risen up in extremely large numbers in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, of course, because the Israeli government has continued to confiscate, bulldoze, and settle locations there as well. I find myself asking, you look at the U.S. media, and they're sucking up to Israel as though they've done nothing wrong. Now, I understand Israel is a strategic partner within the region. I wouldn't go so far as to say they were ever really an ally so much as simply a military partner. I mean, really, they serve as a strip of land that we can potentially land troops on in a volatile region. And in return, we give them money and weapons, and they, are willing to help with proxy wars in all of these Middle Eastern nations, like Syria, where, let's face it, the FSA is probably already getting lethal aid from the U.S. through the Israelis and the Saudis. But how long? I would ask those that support Israel, who usually do so because they are God's chosen people, or because of some catchphrase like only democracy in the Middle East. I've pointed out that's not the case. Turkey has a functioning democracy. Israel has a marginally functional democracy when you really look at it, because, I mean, their government is entirely made up of people who are Zionists. I keep clashing with Israelis and Jewish posters online who say, well, it's, there are Muslims in the Israeli government, but there are no Jews in the government of Palestine. Well, if Jews feel so threatened by the Palestinians, why are there thousands of Jews right now in Israel protesting, in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, protesting against the occupation? Why are there images coming out now of Jews living in Palestine joining the Palestinians fighting against the IDF? They're throwing rocks. I mean, they're not waging an actual ground battle or anything, but they're protesting. They're putting up violent resistance against what they view as anti-Jewish, in a way, because the Jewish scriptures talk about pacifism. Zionism is to Judaism as Islamofascism is to what you would consider mainstream Islam among the lay people. Only when you get this element of fanaticism, which is sort of a form of imperialism as well, because the Islamists, the Islamofascists, claim land that is not currently Islamic. They believe that places like Spain and Italy and parts of Europe in general, parts of North Africa they don't really control, India, is theirs. They claim that as an Islamic homeland in an expansionist sentiment. The Zionists claim everything from the Sinai up to the center of Syria and over into what is now Saudi Arabia, essentially triangulating the region with Kuwait at one corner. And that's what they believe they want and has been given to them by their God. Or they use their God as an excuse for that imperialism. They don't actually believe that there was any divine command. Just like people like Osama, you think he gave a shit about Allah? You think he was actually religious? No, he was born into a secular noble family, and he was hanging out in the 70s with the hip crowd and smoking hash. He wasn't a religious individual. He used religion as a bulwark. He used it as a talking point to get people to sign up with his jihad group, and paid lip service to them and said to these ignorant people out in the middle of nowhere that feel oppressed, yeah, you'll get 40 virgins when you die, so come fight with me. It's the same thing. The Zionists have promised the people of Israel, oh, we'll be great, we'll rule the world, everything will be the most powerful country, no, we'll never fall, God will come down from the skies and the temple will be rebuilt and all of this stuff. It won't happen. Just like the Islamists who are trying to form a mega caliph state won't be successful. It's just not going to happen. They don't have the capability of doing so, and most people aren't ignorant enough to join them and to support their movement. I would ask the people that support Israel, how long can you cram a large population into a tiny land area in Gaza and expect them not to fight? How long can they bear it? The border with Israel is closed. The border with Egypt is closed. Their beachfront is blockaded. They cannot move material in or out of Gaza without the permission of the IDF. How much longer? This is not Israeli land. It was given as a Palestinian region by the UN. It was given under the partition plan to the Palestinians. I understand, oh, well, they're firing rockets. How much damage are the rockets doing in comparison to the ones Israel's firing? People always use this line. They always tell me this. They say, well, if Israel dropped its arms, it'd be wiped off the face of the earth. Because Israel wants peace, but nobody around them is willing to be peaceful. They keep attacking Israel. Israel attacked them also. You can't, hi kitty, you can't say that one side or the other doesn't have any responsibility in this fact. However, the Palestinians do not pose a threat to the nation of Israel. They pose absolutely no threat to anything other than the pavement on the roads when their missile occasionally makes a very small pothole. They don't pose a threat to the Israelis. The Israelis have nuclear weapons. The Israelis have all sorts of long-range missiles. The Israelis have all of the technology that you find anywhere in the first world, as well as billions of dollars a year in free spending granted to them by the United States alone. The Israelis have all that. Palestine, what is Palestine? An increasingly resettled West Bank in which people are fleeing from on a daily basis, which is falling apart anyway because there are more and more riots, there's more and more clashes with police and so forth. And then Gaza. Gaza's this little tiny strip of land. It's not anywhere near even as big as my state. It's like oh, kitty, you want to be the center of attention, don't you? Yeah, we'll let you purr. Okay, now you showed off enough. How much longer can people in Gaza even survive under the conditions that they're under? People say, well, if Mexico started lobbing missiles into the United States, we would respond in kind. Actually, the equivalent would be the United States invading Samoa. That would be an appropriate equivalency. The nation of Israel has far more manpower, far more technology, a lot of tanks, a lot of helicopters, and they are killing mainly civilians. These are not jihadists that they are killing. What part of that do people not understand? These are not fighting individuals. These are little kids, old women and stuff like that, people who are already sick. They attack here's the funny thing. They attack hospitals and make the outrageous claim that there are secret terrorist tunnels underneath the hospitals. So they have to attack them and destroy these hospitals. And then they wonder why people in Gaza are messed up and starving and getting angry at the Israelis. Well, every time you attack Gaza, you are leveling the hospitals, you're destroying the schools, you're destroying critical infrastructure, and then Gaza gets knocked back to the Stone Age. And then you hold it against the Palestinian people, even though only a slim minority of these people are taking part in the fighting. Most of the Palestinians do not take up arms. They protest, they might throw rocks, they might burn tires. That happens everywhere else on Earth. If people in New York City start burning tires and waving banners, the NYPD does not send in drones and start bombing them. That's not logical. Israel has this weird paranoid complex where it feels that anyone that criticizes them, anyone that criticizes their military, anyone that criticizes their motives, anyone that suggests they could ever do anything wrong must be either a complete Nazi or a horrible Islamo-fascist. But the funny thing is, Islamo-fascism is functionally similar to Zionism. They are the same thing. It's just a different religion. It's a form of imperialism that the leaders thereof foisted off on the population under the guise that it is religiously inspired. But it's not. It didn't come down from their God. It didn't come from any divine writing. It didn't come from anything, even in most cases, in their scriptures. Or if it did, it was something that was only half canonized, something like the Hadiths, rather than the actual Quran, or one of these opinionated modern-day writings from Jewish scribes, rather than from the actual Torah. And it is a lie. and it is what they use as a justification. The problem is, we here in the United States are under the control of a bunch of Protestant evangelicals. They think that the modern state of Israel is somehow divine. It's not. It's not on the original borders. It wasn't created by the Jews themselves. It was created by non-Jews. It's being propped up by non-Jews. It can't possibly be considered the actual Holy Land. And the people that are inhabiting it, some of them are not even of that genetic lineage. They have to be of that actual Semitic stock. There are probably more people in Palestine that have that blood than there are in Israel. And people completely overlook this in favor of this weird propagandized line of Israel can do no wrong. And the government and the media are more than happy to dish that out. You see right now, very, very faint, you are beginning to see the propaganda efforts of the Israelis unravel. You are just beginning to see that. You are just for the first time now seeing more than alternative media outlets questioning the Israeli government's claims of primarily fighting Hamas. You see that happening for the very first time right as we speak. You see for the first time a true mass uprising in many countries as well. Of course, the last time this sort of thing happened, people were focused on other events, number one, and the internet wasn't as interconnected. Of course, there was caste-led in all of these operations, but those have been going on intermittently for many decades. The Israeli government seems to have it in mind to reoccupy Gaza. I believe that their strategy is to reoccupy the region, make sure it remains unstable, and develop the offshore gas. Just like they're trying to force as many Palestinians out of the West Bank as they can because they want to absorb these territories. They do not want any partition plan, and if there is one, they want the Palestinians to have as little land as possible. What's the problem? They're going to continue fighting afterwards. The Palestinians aren't going to agree with it because they'll be getting scraps left over from what Israel wanted. Israel is not the only country on earth that matters. It is not the apple of God's eye. They are not the chosen people of any God. They are just human beings like anybody else who happen to be run by an extremely violent, warmongering government that can't get its ass in order. And the United States regrettably has propped them up and overseen essentially what amounts to a genocide, not in the West Bank so much as in Gaza, but a genocide nonetheless of the Palestinian people. And right now you have tens of thousands of Palestinians, probably again being joined by some Jewish individuals and Christians as well, rioting and protesting because they realize the Israeli government will never let them be free. The Palestinians today, under Israeli authority, because let's face it, that's what they're under, because their very lives depend upon Israel choosing not to end them, the relationship is essentially the same as the mythological and quite wrong, but the mythological anyway story of the Jews being enslaved by the pharaohs. Of course, they never were, but now the Palestinians are enslaved by the Israelis. I think also what you see for the first time now is that actually more Israelis are realizing this, realizing that Judaism essentially stresses pacifism unless you are being attacked by someone who's actually capable of enslaving you or destroying you. And they oppose the occupation of Gaza. And how much is this going to cost? They haven't even talked about that. It's the same as when we went into Iraq. It's doomed to fail. The Israeli government must know that it's doomed to fail. You have to assume that they simply want to move in for the gas and to make sure that the Palestinian people are unable to even fart without the IDF knowing about it. So, I think they need to free Gaza and the West Bank area. I think the settlements in the West Bank should be completely removed. The international community shouldn't tolerate that. The West Bank was given to the Palestinians. The Israelis have no right to settle that land. Regardless of if it happens to be next to Jerusalem, it doesn't fucking matter. It's not their land. The UN didn't give them that land. The UN gave that to the Palestinians. Gaza. Palestine is a sovereign state. You don't have to recognize that it's a sovereign state. Most of the world does. The United States is even against most of its allies on this issue. It's ridiculous that we have persisted in propping up a government that is not biblical, that is not based on the Torah, it's not based on the Bible, it's not based on what these people actually claim it was even based on. It's simply a political move. It's like a giant foreign military base that the United States maintains right next to a bunch of countries that we might want to conquer someday. Well, it's costing us too much money, and it's costing too much blood, and it's making us look very, very bad. It's pretty hard to condemn Russia for what they're doing in Ukraine right now when we prop up the Israeli state. It's very, very difficult for our politicians to do that with a straight face. I think it's about time that we either crack down on the Israelis and say, okay, it's time to get out of Gaza, we'll move in and we'll restore order if you're not able to do that, or forsake them entirely if they're not willing to do so. That's about all. Peace out.